Dark empaths could hide some of the most dangerous personality traits, according to Nadja Haim and Alexander Sumich of The Conversation. People with dark personality traits such as psychopathy or narcissism are more likely to be callous, disagreeable, and antagonistic in their nature. Such traits exist on a continuum. We all have more or less of them, and this does not necessarily equate to being clinically diagnosed with a personality disorder, though. Traditionally, people who are high in dark traits are considered to have empathy deficits, potentially making them more dangerous and aggressive than the rest of us, but we recently discovered something that challenges this idea. Our study, published in Personality and Individual Differences, identified a group of individuals with dark traits who report above average empathic capacities. We call them dark empaths. Since this study, the dark empath has earned a reputation as the most dangerous personality profile, but is this really the case? Dark personality traits include psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism, collectively called the dark triad, and most recently it's been suggested that sadism be added, culminating in a dark tetrad. Psychopathy is characterized by a superficial charm and callousness. People high in such traits often show an erratic lifestyle and antisocial behavior. Machiavellianism derives from the writing of Niccolò Machiavelli, a Renaissance author, historian, and philosopher. He described power games involving deception, treachery, and crime. Thus, Machiavellianism refers to an exploitative, cynical, and manipulative nature. Narcissism is characterized by an exaggerated sense of entitlement, superiority, and grandiose thinking, while sadism denotes a drive to inflict and enjoy pain in others. The dark traits, particularly psychopathy and Machiavellianism, have been consistently associated with aggressive and antisocial behavior. The empathy puzzle. Empathy can refer to the capacity to share feelings, namely affective empathy. If you are sad, I also feel sad. That's an example. But it can also be the ability to understand other people's minds, dubbed cognitive empathy. I know what you think and why you are feeling sad is an example. For example, the lack of specifically effective empathy is a well-documented hallmark in clinical psychopathy used to explain their often persistent, instrumental, violent behavior. Our own work supports the notion that one of the reasons people with dark traits hurt other people or have difficulties in relationships is an underpinning lack of empathy. Paradoxically, however, some researchers have previously reported average or even higher levels of some aspects of empathy in some people with dark traits. This makes sense in a way, as to manipulate others for your own gain, or indeed enjoy the pain of others, you must have at least some capacity to understand them. Thus, we questioned whether dark traits and empathy were indeed mutually exclusive phenomena. Dark empaths. We asked almost 1,000 people to complete assessments based on questionnaires on the dark triad and empathy. We then used a method called latent profile analysis that allows you to establish clusters of people with different profiles of certain trait combinations. As expected, we found a traditional dark triad group with low scores in empathy, about 13% of the sample. We also found a group with lower to average level across all traits, about 34% were typicals, and a group with low dark traits and high levels of empathy, about 33% were empaths. However, a fourth group of people, the dark empaths, was clearly evident. They had higher scores on both dark traits and empathy, about 20% of our sample. Interestingly, this latter group scored higher on both cognitive and affective empathy than the dark triad and typical groups. We then characterized these groups based on measures of aggression, general personality, psychological vulnerability, and well-being. The dark empaths were not as aggressive as the traditional dark triad group, suggesting the latter are likely more dangerous. Nevertheless, the dark empaths were more aggressive than typicals and empaths, and at least on a measure of indirect aggression, that is, hurting or manipulating people through social exclusion, malicious humor, and guilt induction. Thus, although the presence of empathy was limiting their level of aggression, it was not eliminating it completely. In line with this motion, empaths were the most agreeable, a personality trait showing how nice or friendly you are, followed by typicals, then dark empaths and dark triads. Interestingly, dark empaths were more extroverted than the rest, a trait reflecting the tendency to be sociable, lively, and active. Thus, the presence of empathy appears to encourage an enjoyment of being or interacting with people, but it may potentially also be motivated by a desire to dominate these people. Moreover, dark empaths were a little higher in neuroticism, a type of negative thinking, but did not score higher on depression, anxiety, or stress. Instead, their neuroticism may reflect subtraits such as anger, hostility, or self-doubt. Indeed, the dark empaths reported judging themselves more harshly than those with dark triad personalities. So it seems that they have a conscience, perhaps even disliking their dark side. Alternatively, their negative emotions may be a response to their self-loathing. Hidden dangers. Though the aggression reported by the dark empaths was not as high as the traditional dark triad group, the danger of this personality profile is that their empathy and likely resulting social skills make their darkness harder to spot. We believe that dark empaths have the capacity to be callous and ruthless, but are able to limit such aggression. It is also worth noting, though, that those clinically diagnosed with an antisocial personality disorder, often showing excessive levels of dark traits, most certainly lack empathy and are dangerous predators, and many of them are in prison. Our research is looking at people in the general population who have elevated levels of dark personality traits rather than personality disorders. We're continuing our quest to find out more about the characteristics of the dark empaths in relation to other psychological outcomes. For example, we are interested in their risk-taking, impulsively or physically aggression behavior. We also want to understand how they process emotions or facial expressions, or how they perceive and react to threats. We're currently replicating and extending some of our findings using the dark tetrad instead. Our results are yet to be published, but indicate there are 2 further profiles in addition to the 4 groups we've already identified. One is an emotionally internalized group with high levels of affective empathy and average cognitive empathy without elevating dark traits. The other shows a pattern similar to autistic traits, particularly low cognitive empathy and average affective empathy in the absence of elevated dark traits. And we're hoping this research may be able to shift our understanding of empathy in the context of the dark traits. This is by Nadja Haim, Senior Lecturer of Psychology, Nottingham Trent University, and Alexander Sumich, Associate Professor of Psychology, Nottingham Trent University, on the conversation under Creative Commons on Science Alert. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.